أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
السلام عليكم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وسبحان الله العلي العظيم. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمد رسول الله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على الحبيب المصطفى، على النبي الأمين المرسل رحمة للعالمين، خاتم الأنبياء والرسل أجمعين، وعلى آله الأطهار الميامين، وعلى أصحابه المختارين، وعلى من اتبعوا بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. سبحان الله، سبحان الواحد الأحد، نؤمن به ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستجيره ونستنصره، فإنه حقا من هدى الله فلا مضل له، ومن يضلله فلا هادي له. اللهم يا رحمن يا رحيم، يا علي يا عظيم. اللهم يا رب اهدنا فيمن هديت، وعافنا فيمن عافيت، وقنا واصرف عنا شر ما قضيت، فإنك سبحانك تقضي ولا يقضى عليك، وإنه يا ربنا لا يذل من واليت ولا يعز من عاديت. تباركت ربنا وتعاليت. نستغفرك يا ربنا من كل ذنب ونتوب إليك، ونؤمن بك ونتوكل عليك، ونشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك. عليك توكلنا وإليك أنبنا، ولله المصير. So many families, I'm sure, all over the United States, this is the time of the summer when we start approaching the end of August. And for so many families, it is a time of considerable promise in the hearts of some, excitement, trepidation, nervousness, anticipation. This time when the summer is wrapping up, and for so many families, their children are either returning to college, especially universities that are on a semester system, schools that are on a quarterly system usually have through September. But for so many schools that are on a semester system, end of August is the time where either so many are returning to college or the even more burdensome and transformative occasion of kids that are leaving their families for the first time to go to college. And the truth is that in both cases, but especially for families that have children leaving them for the first time to go to college, this is that critical moment, critical time, where someone stands literally at the doorsteps of adulthood, as if right there at the entrance point, pausing to enter the world of adulthood with all its promises and all its challenges. And for so many families, you have to say goodbye to your children with whatever you've armed them with and empowered them with over what in hindsight seems literally like a glimpse in time, an instant. The years that they went through school, years of childhood and high school, appear in hindsight as if it is just a flicker in time. And all those who would go to college for the first time, they will have to make decisions that will have an impact and ramifications and consequences literally for the rest of their life. And they will make these decisions without their parents hovering over them, playing interference to try to navigate or mediate or mitigate the consequences. The decisions that the children of yesteryear are going to be making are the decisions that will carry them through into adulthood, when they are no longer children, but men and women, quite literally, not figuratively, men and women of the future. And the reality is that for so many Muslim families, like non-Muslim families, it is but the grace of God and whatever value system you imbued and instilled in your children that are the sole protectors and sole safety net for those children who can, quite often for the first time, and will for the first time, quite often, not necessarily, but be making decisions that their families will have very little recourse in, and very little opportunity to intervene in or to make a difference in. I've gone through these same moments so many decades ago when, at a very young age, I think I was 19 at the time, I was forced to say goodbye to my family and fly to the United States like so many children of colonized societies and nations. Say goodbye to the family that you've known, the only life that you've known. Say goodbye to your mother and father and fly to the United States to chart an unclear but hopefully better future. And of course, it's the sunnah of life, it's just the nature of life, that you really don't know how your parents felt like as they said goodbye to you, leaving you just with the grace of God and the value system that hopefully they've instilled in you through the years. The nature of life is that you don't really know how your parents felt like. You don't know the anxiety, you don't know the stress, you don't know the trepidation, you don't know the pressure, until decades later, you stand in the same position as the parent bidding farewell to your child, who is not going to be a child anymore and is being initiated into adulthood. And inevitably, as your children are initiated into adulthood, you are forced to redefine your life because you are no longer simply or straightforwardly a father or mother of someone, but you must redefine your existence independent of anyone but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The value system. And over the many years, when I think of the so many people that I knew decades ago that came with me around the same time, either shortly before me or exactly with me or shortly after me, that also traveled away from their families to attend college, separated from their loved ones. And when I think back of all the faces and all the names that I struggle to remember, and most of the names are now forgotten, and the faces are but abstractions of memory. And when I think back of the numerous unpredictable fates that so many of those that I knew, friendships that one imagined will last a lifetime that didn't, acquaintances that one was sure that they're going to remember forever, but now seem distant and irrelevant, trajectories that one imagined will be their own in life that ultimately fizzled out into nothing. And I think back of all those that I knew that are lost to me and think back, not just lost to me, but lost to their families, and quite often, lost to themselves. I think back of people who, at that stage in life, in high school, thought they knew who they are, and that decades later, they are practically unrecognizable, either to me or to themselves, the self that existed decades ago when they were at the doorstep of adulthood. So many kids, so many, are forced down a path in life where they are forced to redefine themselves and confront so many challenges that quite often end up in ways that leave them through the journey of life thoroughly compromised and unrecognizable even to their former self. And when I think, what is it without the supervision and oversight of your mother and your father and your family that keeps you on a path that makes you ultimately confront the opportunity for a wrong decision that leads you down a wrong path? And those who said yes to that decision and went through whatever is in store for them because of that decision, and those that said no and did not go down a wrong path. And time and again, I come back to the same answer. Families that have seen their children in retrospect ultimately go down a right path, a moral path, an ethical path, before even teaching their children to fear God, they taught their children a very basic value, and that's the value of dignity, self-respect. They instilled in their children a powerful sense of identity that says, I am better than this. And that becomes the watchguard, quite often the savior, the very power that intervenes and intercedes to protect your children at a time, and so many times, where you will not be able to intervene on their behalf or intercede or play interference in any way. Your child's self-perception, your own child's sense of identity, their sense of what's becoming for them and what's unbecoming. For a decade, I served at UCLA as the chair of the Student Conduct Committee. This is the committee that actually held trials for students who had committed ethical violations and were not able to resolve the charges against them with the dean, quite often because the charges are too serious or because the penalties for the charges are so drastic that the student figures, well, let's take my chances with the student conduct committee, with the student conduct committee's hearings, like a trial, effectively, where you call witnesses and you hear testimony, and ultimately the committee then passes a judgment. And the infractions, you can imagine that students that came before this committee, you can imagine the range of infractions, from disorderly conduct, like being intoxicated in public, for instance, or destroying university property, to numerous cases of cheating and plagiarism, to, in the extreme and in the most horrible situations, cases of rape and sexual assault. And the thing that I would always notice with students who've ended up in a world of trouble is that clearly these students were shocked by the fact that they ended up where they did end up. None of these students, none of them, for an instant thought they were going to end up committing the ethical infractions that they in fact committed. It is very rare indeed to meet someone who planned a violation. Student after student after student speaks as if they were overwhelmed by circumstance and overwhelmed by simply events unfolding that sweep the student in their wake. But time and time and time again, the job of this committee is to literally hear the testimony of all and to do what you see in trials, to go through all the micro steps that led to the violation. But time and time again, you would see clear evidence that there were many instances and moments that the student could have hit the brake, could have avoided the disastrous course of conduct. They could have avoided the entire problem if they had a strong sense of their own ethical being, of what's right and wrong, a strong sense of what's becoming and what's not becoming of them. In 99% of cases, 99% of cases, the student is swept into a course of action because of the student's acquaintances and friendships. And the very people that would often come to testify against the student to distance themselves from the course of conduct that the accused student ultimately had taken, whether it is cheating, whether it is destruction of property, whether it's disorderly conduct or whether it is sexual assault in one form or another, the very people that actually were the direct cause of the students, of the involvement of a student in a path, a course of conduct, those very same people would be the people testifying later on to distance themselves and to say, this guy's narrative that tries to lay part of the blame on us is flawed because we didn't force him or her to do anything. Our role, in fact, was minimal, was very minor. While, of course, as you would imagine, the students' own self-perceptions was that these are the friends of yesteryear, and if it hadn't been for them, and if it hadn't been for the stories that they shared with me to ease my way down a certain path, I wouldn't have gone astray. That strong sense of the self, of what's becoming and what's not becoming. What is the me, the integral me? What is the me that I can live with? What is the me that I can respect? What is the me that I can look at in the mirror and not try to look away in shame or distress? A strong ethical backbone, a strong sense of what is needed for a person to respect themselves. This comes with the moral example that you set before your children. Of course, one is immediately reminded of perhaps the most famous advice given by a father to their child in the entire Islamic tradition. The wisdom of Luqman in the chapter of the Quran called Surah Luqman. So many Muslims don't pay careful attention to what Luqman literally tells his son. The advice that Luqman radiallahu anhu or sallallahu alayhi wasallam, there's disagreement in the Islamic tradition whether Luqman was a prophet or not. But anyway, first Luqman tells his son, لا تشرك بالله إن الشرك لظلم عظيم. To paraphrase this, give God God's due. For a person to have a realistic view of the self, they must be anchored in a moral paradigm where they think it is imperative upon them to give each their due. If they are unable to be fair with God, if they are unable to give God the honor and the respect and the deference that God is due, if they fail in that challenge, then the risk is indeed very high that their sense of ethical justice is skewed, and that they will not be able even to give the very self of themselves its due. يا بني أقم الصلاة. Persevere in your prayers. Because prayers is the direct, consistent line to your Creator. Don't be like those hypocrites who only remember Allah, remember their God, when they are in trouble and when life crashes all around them. Remember, think about the fact, like all these students, in all these student conduct cases, once charges are leveled against them, and once it becomes clear that they will be expelled if these charges stick, in case after case, as we investigate the facts of the student's life, you always see the same thing. After the charges, the student started becoming religious. Often I would see students standing in the hallway, praying, whispering prayers, imploring, pleading, begging. Of course, in this context, it was always either they intensified their presence or their visitations of churches. Sometimes they would even bring clergy to testify on their behalf, or rabbis to testify on behalf. And I would always ask the rabbi or the priest or whoever is testifying on behalf, when did the students start regularly attending? And time again, it would always be post-disaster. So when Luqman tells his son, give God God's due, there will be many moments in life where with every fiber in your being, you will wish that God is standing with you. Whether you commit an infraction in college or you don't, there are going to be numerous moments in life, but your sense of self-respect should call upon you not to be one of those hypocrites who, when the disaster comes, because in life disasters will come, that's one thing you can count on. Don't be like those who, when the disaster comes, suddenly they remember they have a God, and they remember that their God has rights, and they remember that they owe God a great deal. But of course, what other than a person's self-respect? What other than a person's insistence not to be a hypocrite, that will tell a person, it is unbecoming of me to remember God in the most opportunistic and functionalist manner. When I am in a predicament, I suddenly remember God all the time. And when I am in no predicament, I wax philosophy. And I say things like, well, why does God need my prayers? Well, as long as I'm a good person, what difference does it make? Well, but then Luqman gives his son the advice that so many Muslim families love to turn away from and indeed thoroughly ignore. First, Luqman tells his son, give God God's due. Persevere in your prayers. Train yourself to always be in remembrance of God and build a relationship with God because it is God who is your true parent. Me, your father, your mother, we are proxies. We played the role of your parents through your childhood. But we who played this role, as you were a baby, as you were as a child, as you were growing up, we were but proxies. The real parent, the true parent, was God all along. So give God God's due. Don't be selfish. Don't expect God to give you your due when you are miserly and refuse to give God God's due. Don't expect your parents to give you your due. Don't expect other human beings to give you your due. If you are unfair and unjust and refuse to give God God's due, and what will be your motivating and driving force? It is your self-perception, your sense of self-respect, what dignity means to you. As simply, I want to be treated fairly, so I'm going to treat others fairly, and I start with God. But then, next comes Luqman's advice. وَأْمُرْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَانْهَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. Right after Salah, son, what should be the defining ethic of your life? What in fact should be your life mission? What should be your very job in life is وَأْمُرْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَانْهَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ وَاصْبِرْ عَلَى مَا أَصَابَكَ. Diligently work to serve the cause of justice. وَأْمُرْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Try to establish, try to give foundation, try to serve and support and defend what is right and what is just. And speak against وَانْهَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. Speak against, take a stand and oppose what is wrong. And know that when you take a stand for what is right and against what is wrong, evil people will target you, will attack you, will try to demean you, will try to impeach your motives, will try to make you think lesser of yourself, will try to mock you and laugh at you, will try to say that you're a loser and that you're a dreamer and that you are impractical. This is precisely why وَاصْبِرْ عَلَى مَا أَصَابَكَ. Persevere in patience. Just because you discover that those who take moral positions and ethical stands are going to be vilified and attacked and slandered and demeaned. But it is self-respect, your strong sense of self-dignity that's going to call upon you. Persevere. Wither away the hardships. It doesn't matter. But why doesn't it matter? It doesn't matter because my God, my true parent, tells me it's not all about this life. As long as my true parent knows my true motives and my true intentions, as long as my true parent honors me and respects me, I am going to stand up for what is right. I will persevere. Let the detractors detract all they want. Yes, it's costly to stand by what is right and what is just. But me and my true parent are content with each other. We are content with one another. You have your path, and I have mine. This is why when I think back, all the compatriots, the colleagues, the friends, through all the years, those who lost their way, those who ended up convicted of tax fraud or some type of ethical violation, those who became very wealthy businessmen or wealthy lawyers who hardly remember the suffering of their own people or hardly remember what it means to be a Muslim, oppressed and suffering in the lands, what it means to be a refugee, dispossessed of your property and your home, what it means to be persecuted, jailed and tortured for your convictions and beliefs. They've forgotten everything. It's because their relationship with their true parent is broken. And their sense of self-respect and dignity is long lost. They no longer respond to the call of what is good or ethical. And their life is no longer about fighting what is unjust and ugly. Their parents might have been decent people, might have been good people, but they've long lost their paths. I wish every Muslim child would hear me. the transformation that you are going through is the opportunity to wake up to the fact that to this point, your proxy parents could shelter you, could hover all around you, could make sure that you're protected and sheltered and safe. And now, the role of these proxy parents becomes constrained and small. But this is the opportunity to fully wake up to the fact that there is a true parent, a real parent, a real caretaker, the one who gave you the proxy parents in the first place, the one who gave you the health, the well-being, the intellect, the one who took care of you and sheltered you to this point. And now, the real adulthood, and the fully grown-up decision. Do you acknowledge the extended hand of your real parent? Or do you deny it? But keep in mind that in denying it, you are truly denying yourself, your sense of integrity, and your true sense of true justice. And the path of life will become far more precarious for you, far more risky. In 20 years, in 30 years, without the guiding hand of your true parent, because you will no longer listen to your proxy parents, without the guiding hand of your true parent, the self, yourself, in 20 years, in 30 years, might become truly, completely unrecognizable to the self that you have now. If you're a male, the likelihood is that you will be balding. The likelihood is that you will be overweight. The likelihood is that all the things that you used to look down on, all the things that you thought losers do in life, the obsession with material things, the gorging, the incessant consumption, the egocentrism, the megalomania, all these things will become you. It will be you. And you'll think back at the self that was going off to college. And I pray that you are not one of those people who's going to be thinking, God, what I would give to go back and do it right this time. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم أسأل الله يستجب لكم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وسبحان الله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على الحبيب المصطفى محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن اتبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Luqman gives his son another piece of advice. ولا تمشي في الأرض مرحا. ولا تمشي في الأرض مرحا. Do not tread upon this earth, maraha literally means with hubris. What is treading on earth with hubris? Treading on this earth irresponsibly. Treading on this earth arrogantly. Walking on this earth. In fact, Luqman says to his son, you are not going to be you're not going to be as tall as the mountains. And believe me, the earth is not going to remember your footsteps. لن تخرق الأرض. Don't ever think that there is something so special about you that the earth tells itself, here is this special human being treading upon me. No. You tread upon the earth like everything that God created treads upon the earth. You tread upon the earth like all of God's creatures. So don't demand more than your share. And don't tread with hubris. What's tread with hubris? إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ كُلَّ مُخْتَالٍ فَخُورٍ. Allah doesn't love or doesn't like, doesn't accept, doesn't approve of those who walk upon the earth egocentrically. All they can think of is themselves. What I want, what I need, what I desire. If only we would truly pay attention to what that means. Son, daughter, yourself that is going off to college now, can't imagine that you would ever become one of those people who, in order to earn a fat paycheck, will be blissfully destroying Allah's earth every day of their life, just so that they can continue depositing their fat paycheck in the bank. Or among those people who will be building weapons for killing human beings, contributing to the destruction of our environment, of Mother Earth, tearing life down, destroying the habitats of so many of God's creatures who have rights just like you do. But they'll do it and they say, well, I've got to send my children to college. Well, when your children grow up and know what their proxy parents actually did for a living, and how they paid for for your education, for their children's education, they're going to follow in your footsteps. And when they follow in the footsteps, they will be divorced from the divine. Divorced from the divine means the deconstruction of the self, of their sense of integrity, of their sense of justice, of their sense of self-perception. And with this compromised self, they will receive and implement demonic orders and be engaged in demonic activity. And when life zips by, because life will zip by, you feel like you're just starting college and poof, in a blink, college is done, and you blink, and you're in your middle ages, and you blink, and your middle ages are gone, their history, and you're thinking, how many more years do I have on this earth? And then when the moment of death arrives, daughter, son, don't be like those hypocrites who, when they get the news that they have the cancer, or their heart starts giving out, or they receive whatever news that tells them it's your turn, suddenly they remember they have a God, and that this God has rights. They spent an entire life ignoring the rights of God, ignoring prayer, ignoring the rights of other human beings. They've contributed a great deal of destruction and evil to this earth. They've earned money at the expense of the rights of other human beings all around the globe. They willfully neglected what is happening to children halfway around the globe, so they can continue making the fat paycheck they're making. And then, when they realize it's all over, then they remember they have a God. And the hypocrisy is so too much to bear. So they adopt a myth, an irrational, crazy myth. God will forgive me. God will bless me anyway. God will save my soul anyway. How about all the justice you've done? Well, God is most forgiving. God died for our sins if you're Christian. Well, but it's unfair. You've taken much more than your fair share in life. You've given yourself your due at the expense of the suffering and hurt of others. Well, come on. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to talk about it. I'm going to go to services in the mosque that tells me what I want to hear. I'm fine. And as long as I'm praying now, God is going to forgive everything. And we remain in this cycle. One final word. For all our Muslim children, wake up, realize that your parents have failed. Once upon a time, we were your age, and we would think about the failures of our parents, and we would think it cannot be the same. These failures will not be repeated. We would see Muslims slaughtered in genocides around the world. We would see Muslims' lands and homes being stolen and Muslims being displaced, and we would see Muslims jailed and tortured around the world by despots and dictators that are supported and are installed in power and maintained in power by non-Muslim countries that then turn around and, after giving a Muslim a dictator and maintaining that dictator in power for decades, point the finger at Muslims and say, you're bad people, you have a bad religion, because the only thing you know is despotism. Well, it's the despotism you forced on me. We were your age once. And we would read the facts of life and we would tell ourselves it's going to be different with us. The truth of the matter is it didn't become different with us. And it didn't become different with us because we didn't try hard enough and there wasn't enough of us trying hard enough. Too many of us went to college and our sole preoccupation was to become engineers and doctors, to make plenty of money, to take care of ourselves. Meanwhile, Muslims in Bosnia got slaughtered. Muslims in Albania got obliterated. Muslims in Palestine got annihilated. Muslims in China are being annihilated. Muslims in India, and we can go on and on and on. And things are not going to change until we get to that generation that goes to college but achieves the critical mass, that critical mass of enough people expending enough effort to turn things around. And that's not going to happen with your children becoming egocentric doctors and engineers. That's not going to happen with your children making a good life for themselves and their children. It's going to happen when your children learn to respect themselves enough to say, I embrace who I am. I do not deny who I am. I am a Muslim. I am non-white, the chances are, or even if you're white, I am Muslim and I'm white and I'm proud of who I am, because for a Muslim, there's only a human being. There is no Arab, no black, no white. And as a Muslim, my dignity is part and parcel of the dignity of my ummah. If there are Muslims being butchered in Bosnia, that's on me. If there are Muslims being persecuted in India, that's on me. If there are Muslims in concentration camps in China, that's on me. If there are Muslims filling prisons in Egypt and Saudi and elsewhere, that's on me. And because it's on me, part of standing for my dignity and my self-respect is that I fight for their rights. I pray that the generation will come where that critical mass of people will exist with expending that critical amount of effort to turn things around. Where we get beyond our selfishness and our moral ambivalence to being finally anchored in a real Islam, in a true Islam. Finally, I don't know if you guys who are going off to college are going to be that critical generation that turns things around. But you can definitely, even if you are not, you can definitely be part of the path that leads to this generation. And there, just look in the mirror. Just worry about yourself. Create the precedent that opens up the possibility of hope in the future. Because as long as you do not believe in yourself, and as long as you have no hope in yourself and for yourself, and as long as you continue feeling that, well, what difference can I make? Then truly there is no hope in tomorrow. At least contribute to that hope by believing in yourself. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم إني داع فآمنوا. اللهم اغفر لنا، اللهم ارحمنا، اللهم تب علينا يا تواب، اللهم ارض عنا يا علي عظيم، وانصر الإسلام وأعز المسلمين، وارفع بفضلك كلمة الحق والدين. Allah forgive our sins. Allah guide us to the straight path. Guide us. Allah give us the strength to believe in ourselves. To give you, Allah, your due. And to give ourselves its due. And to give our Ummah its due. To be just people. To be fair people. To be humble people. To be people who honor our mother, the earth. Who honor our one and true and only parent, you, Allah. And who honor the proxy parents you've blessed us with on this earth. وصلي وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأقم الصلاة.